The rain felt like ice against Jasmine's dark skin as she stood on the sidewalk, her suitcase heavy in her trembling hand. Behind her, the house she had called home for 5 years glowed with warm yellow light, but that warmth was no longer hers. The front door had slammed shut 20 minutes ago, and with it, her marriage had ended with words that still echoed in her mind like a cruel song. "If you're so smart, then survive on your own." Thomas had laughed, actually laughed, as she gathered her clothes with shaking hands. "See how far your big dreams get you without my paycheck keeping you afloat." She had turned to look at him one last time, hoping to see regret in his eyes, some sign that the man she married was still there underneath all that anger and control. Instead, she saw satisfaction. He was happy to see her go. Happy to prove his point that she was nothing without him. The argument had started, like so many others, with her business plan. She had spread the papers across their kitchen table after dinner, her heart beating fast with excitement as she showed him the numbers she had worked on for weeks. A catering business. Something small to start, but with real potential. She had saved $3,000 from her job at the insurance office before Thomas convinced her to quit and focus on being a wife. "This is really good," she had said, pointing to the projected earnings. "I could start with small events, maybe some office lunches. Mrs. Peterson next door said she would hire me for her daughter's graduation party." Thomas had barely looked at the papers. He was scrolling through his phone, the blue light making his face look cold and distant. "Jasmine, we've talked about this. You don't know anything about running a business. You can barely keep our house organized." "That's not true." Her voice had been steady, but inside, something was cracking. "I've been researching this for months. I know what I'm doing. Do you?" He had finally looked up, his dark eyes challenging her. "Because last time I checked, you dropped out of business school to marry me. You quit your job because you said you wanted to focus on our family. Now you want to play entrepreneur." The word "play" had hit her like a slap. She had worked so hard on this plan, stayed up late running numbers, researching permits, testing recipes. This wasn't playing. This was her trying to build something for herself, something that was hers. "I'm not playing, Thomas. I'm serious about this." "Serious?" He had laughed then, the same laugh that was still ringing in her ears as she stood in the rain. "You've never finished anything you started. Remember the photography phase? The yoga instructor certification you never completed? Now you want to start a business." Each word had been chosen to hurt, and they found their target. Jasmine had felt her confidence shrinking, the way it always did when Thomas decided to remind her of every time she had tried and failed to find her path. But this time, something was different. This time, instead of backing down, she had stood up. "Maybe I never finished those things because you convinced me I couldn't do them." His face had changed then, surprise replacing the smug satisfaction. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." The words had come out stronger than she felt. "Every time I try to do something for myself, you find a way to tear it down. You make me feel small and stupid until I give up." "I make you feel small." Thomas had stood up, his 6-foot frame towering over her. "I'm the one who pays for this house. I'm the one who bought your car, who puts food on this table. I'm the one who takes care of you because you can't take care of yourself. I never asked you to take care of me like I'm some kind of child. Then stop acting like one." His voice had filled the kitchen, bouncing off the walls like an explosion. "Stop coming to me with these ridiculous ideas and expecting me to pretend they make sense. You want to start a catering business? With what money? What experience? What connections? You don't have anything, Jasmine. You are nothing without me." The silence that followed had been deafening. Jasmine had stared at her husband, this man she had loved for 7 years, married for 5, and realized she was looking at a stranger. When had he started seeing her as a burden instead of a partner? When had her dreams become ridiculous instead of worth supporting? Fine, she had whispered, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. If that's what you really think of me, then I'll prove you wrong. She had walked to their bedroom and started packing, her hands moving automatically while her mind reeled. Thomas had followed her, his voice getting louder as he realized she was serious. Where are you going to go? You don't have any money. You don't have anywhere to stay. You think your sister wants to deal with your drama again? She had kept packing, folding clothes with mechanical precision. T-shirts, jeans, her favorite dress, the one he used to say made her eyes sparkle. Not anymore. Jasmine, stop being dramatic. Unpack your stuff and we'll forget this whole conversation happened. But she couldn't forget. She couldn't pretend she hadn't heard the complete lack of respect in his voice, the way he had dismissed her like she was a child playing dress-up. She couldn't pretend that this was the first time he had made her feel worthless, just the first time she had decided not to accept it. I'm not being dramatic, she had said, zipping up her suitcase. I'm leaving. And now here she was, standing in the rain at 9 o'clock at night, with nowhere to go and $847 in her checking account. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably Thomas calling to tell her she could come back if she apologized and promised to be reasonable. She didn't even look at it. A car drove by, its headlights sweeping across her for a moment before disappearing into the night. The rain was getting heavier, and she knew she needed to find somewhere to stay. She thought about calling her sister Nina, but pride held her back. Nina had warned her about Thomas from the beginning, had told her he was too controlling, too possessive. Jasmine had defended him then, insisted that he was just protective, that he loved her. Maybe Nina had been right all along. Jasmine pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and started walking toward the main road. There was a motel about a mile away, nothing fancy, but it would have to do for tonight. Tomorrow she would figure out what came next. Tonight, she just needed to get out of the rain and away from the sound of Thomas's laughter echoing in her mind. As she walked, she thought about the business plan still spread across their kitchen table. All those hours of work, all that hope and excitement, dismissed in less than 5 minutes. But the numbers didn't lie. The plan was solid. She knew it was solid. Maybe Thomas was wrong. Maybe she could survive on her own. Maybe she could do more than survive. Maybe she could prove him wrong about everything. The motel room smelled like old cigarettes and cheap air freshener, but it was dry and warm and it was hers for the night. Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, still in her damp clothes, and counted the cash in her wallet for the third time. $47. Her credit card had enough for maybe 3 more nights here, and then what? She looked around the small room with its faded carpet and thin walls. This wasn't how she had imagined her life would go. At 32, she should have been building something with her husband, maybe talking about starting a family, growing together. Instead, she was sitting alone in a motel room, questioning every choice she had made for the past 5 years. Her phone had buzzed 17 times during the walk here. She finally looked at it, seeing Thomas's name lighting up the screen over and over. The messages started angry, then got worried, then angry again. Stop being childish and come home. Fine, if you want to play games, play games. Jasmine, I'm worried about you. Where are you? This is ridiculous. Call me back. She turned the phone face down on the nightstand. Let him worry. Let him wonder where she was and if she was okay. For 5 years, she had always been the one to apologize first, to smooth things over, to make peace. Not this time. The rain continued to pound against the small window, and Jasmine finally allowed herself to cry. Not the pretty, silent tears from movies, but the ugly, gasping sobs of someone whose world had just fallen apart. She cried for the years she had spent making herself smaller to fit into Thomas's vision of what a wife should be. She cried for the dreams she had given up, the friends she had lost touch with because Thomas didn't like them, the parts of herself she had buried to keep the peace. Most of all, she cried because part of her believed he was right. Part of her really did think she was nothing without him. When the tears finally stopped, she felt empty but strangely clear. She walked to the small mirror above the dresser and looked at herself. Her dark skin was blotchy from crying, her natural hair was frizzy from the rain, and her brown eyes were red and swollen. She looked like someone who had lost everything. But she was still here. She was still standing. Jasmine pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Nina's number. Her finger hovered over the call button for a long time. Nina was 3 years younger but had always seemed more together, more confident. She had her own apartment, a good job at a marketing firm, a life that didn't revolve around making someone else happy. The last time they had really talked was at Christmas, and even then, Thomas had cut the visit short, claiming he didn't feel well. But Jasmine knew he just didn't like the way Nina looked at him, like she could see right through his charm to the controlling man underneath. She almost called. Almost swallowed her pride and asked for help. But at the last second, she put the phone down. If she was going to prove Thomas wrong, she had to do it herself. She had to prove it to herself too. Instead, she opened her laptop and logged into her bank account. The numbers were worse than she remembered. After paying for the motel, she would have about $800 left. Her credit cards were nearly maxed out from the last few months when Thomas had been too busy to remember to give her money for groceries and gas. She had been covering the household expenses without him knowing, not wanting to add more stress to his already busy schedule. How had she become this person? When had she started tiptoeing around her own husband's moods, managing his stress like it was her job to keep him comfortable? She thought back to the woman she had been when they first met. She had been working at the insurance office, taking business classes at night, planning to get her degree and maybe start her own firm someday. She had been independent, confident, full of plans and dreams. Thomas had said he loved her ambition, her drive, her intelligence. But somewhere along the way, those same qualities had started to annoy him. Her late-night studying became selfish. Her career goals became unrealistic. Her opinions became argumentative. Slowly, piece by piece, she had let him convince her that being a supportive wife was more important than being herself. The worst part was that she had done it willingly. She had told herself she was being mature, compromising, putting their relationship first. She had convinced herself that love meant sacrifice, that a good wife supported her husband's dreams even if it meant giving up her own. But sitting in this motel room, with nowhere to go and no one to call, she realized that what she had been calling love was actually fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being enough, fear of admitting that Nina had been right about Thomas all along. Jasmine opened her laptop and pulled up her business plan. She had saved it to the cloud, and seeing the familiar numbers and projections on the screen made her heart race the way it had in the kitchen earlier. This was good work. She had spent months researching the local catering market, talking to potential customers, testing recipes. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was solid, realistic, achievable. She started making a list of what she would need to get started. A small apartment where she could cook legally. Basic equipment. A business license. Transportation for deliveries. It would be tight, but it was possible. If she was careful with every dollar, if she worked hard and smart, she could make this happen. The rain was finally starting to slow down, and through the thin walls, she could hear a baby crying in the next room. Life was happening all around her, people dealing with their own struggles and victories, their own messy, complicated lives. She wasn't the first woman to leave a bad marriage, and she wouldn't be the last. She wasn't special or unique in her pain, but she also wasn't alone in her strength. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Thomas. It was a text from an unknown number. "Hi Jasmine, this is Mrs. Peterson from next door. I heard what happened tonight. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to call. The offer for my daughter's graduation party still stands. Patricia, Jasmine stared at the message, feeling something warm bloom in her chest. Mrs. Peterson must have heard the argument through the thin walls of their duplex. Instead of pretending nothing had happened, she was reaching out, offering support and even business. Maybe Thomas was wrong about more than just her ability to survive. Maybe there were people who believed in her, who saw value in what she had to offer. Maybe she just hadn't been looking in the right places. She typed back quickly, "Thank you so much. I would love to talk about the party. Can I call you tomorrow?" The response came immediately, "Of course. And Jasmine? You're stronger than you know." For the first time since she left the house, Jasmine smiled. It was small and shaky, but it was real. She wasn't just going to survive this. She was going to thrive. Tomorrow, she would start building a new life. Tonight, she would plan. The apartment wasn't much to look at. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person, the living room could fit a couch and nothing else, and the bathroom had a shower that dripped constantly. But it was clean, it was cheap, and most importantly, it was hers. Jasmine signed the lease with her hands shaking slightly, watching her savings account balance drop to dangerously low levels. The security deposit and first month's rent had taken nearly everything she had, leaving her with exactly $127 to her name. But the landlord, Mr. Rodriguez, had been kind when she explained her situation. He had waived the usual credit check and references when she offered to pay 3 months in advance with her credit card. "Fresh starts are important," he had said in his gentle accent. "Everyone deserves a chance to build something new." That was 3 days ago. Now she was sitting on the floor of her empty apartment, eating a peanut butter sandwich and looking at job listings on her phone. The reality of her situation was starting to sink in. She needed income immediately, which meant her catering business would have to wait. Survival came first, dreams came second. Her phone rang, and she saw Nina's name on the screen. She had finally called her sister the night before, swallowing her pride when her stomach started growling and she realized she had eaten nothing but vending machine snacks for 2 days. "How's the apartment?" Nina asked without preamble. "Perfect," Jasmine lied, looking around at the bare walls and empty rooms. "It's exactly what I need." "Jasmine." Nina's voice was gentle but firm. "You don't have to pretend with me. I know this is hard." The kindness in her sister's voice almost broke her resolve. For a moment, she wanted to admit everything, how scared she was, how broke she was, how some nights she wondered if Thomas had been right about her inability to take care of herself. But she pushed the feelings down. "I'm fine, really. I actually have a job interview this afternoon." It wasn't quite a lie. She was planning to walk into every restaurant and diner within 5 miles and ask if they were hiring. It wasn't exactly an interview, but it was a start. "Where?" "A few places. I'm casting a wide net." Nina was quiet for a moment. "You know you can ask for help, right? I have a spare room, and my couch is actually pretty comfortable." "I know. But I need to do this myself." "Needing help doesn't make you weak." "I know that too." Jasmine stood up and walked to her tiny kitchen window, looking out at the busy street below. "But I need to prove something. To myself more than anyone else." "Okay," Nina said, and Jasmine could hear the worry in her voice. "But if you change your mind, I'll call you. I promise." After they hung up, Jasmine got dressed in her best interview outfit and started walking. The first 3 restaurants weren't hiring. The 4th told her to come back next week. The 5th, a small diner called Rosa's Kitchen, had a help wanted sign in the window that looked like it had been there for months. The bell above the door chimed when she walked in, and she was immediately hit with the smell of bacon and coffee and something sweet baking in the back. The diner was busy despite it being mid-afternoon, with construction workers and office employees filling most of the red vinyl booths. An older Latina woman looked up from the cash register and smiled. You hear about the job? Yes, ma'am, Jasmine said, suddenly nervous. I saw your sign. Good timing. My last waitress quit yesterday with no notice. The woman looked her up and down, not unkindly. You ever work in a restaurant before? No, but I learn fast. And I really need this job. Something in her voice must have convinced the woman, because she nodded. I'm Rosa Garcia. This is my place. You can start tomorrow morning if you want. 6 a.m. shift, ends at 2. Tips are decent if you're friendly and fast. Jasmine felt her knees go weak with relief. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I'm Jasmine. Well, Jasmine, I hope you're ready to work. This place gets crazy during breakfast rush, but the customers are mostly good people. Treat them right, and they'll treat you right back. Rosa spent the next hour showing her around the diner, explaining the menu and the system, introducing her to the cook and the other waitress. Everyone was friendly but busy, the kind of people who worked hard and didn't have time for drama. It felt honest in a way that Jasmine's old life hadn't. When she got back to her apartment that evening, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. It was a small job, probably didn't pay much, but it was hers. She had walked in there and gotten hired on her own merit, without Thomas's connections or influence. It was a start. She called Mrs. Peterson about the graduation party and spent an hour on the phone going over menu options and logistics. The party was in 2 weeks, which would give her time to save a little money for supplies and get used to her new schedule. Mrs. Peterson was paying $300 for food for 30 people, which would barely cover costs, but it was her first real catering job. That night, she lay on her air mattress, her one furniture purchase so far, and made lists. Things she needed for the apartment, equipment she would need for catering, goals for her first month. It felt good to plan again, to think beyond just getting through each day. Her phone buzzed with another text from Thomas. He had been sending them daily, alternating between angry demands that she come home and concerned messages asking if she was okay. She had stopped reading them, but she couldn't bring herself to block his number completely. That felt too final, too much like admitting their marriage was really over. But lying there in her tiny apartment, surrounded by the sounds of her new neighborhood, traffic and voices and life happening all around her, she realized she hadn't thought about Thomas all day. She had been too busy building something new to miss what she had left behind. Maybe that was progress. The next morning, she was at Rosa's kitchen at 5:45 a.m., ready to start her new life. Rosa handed her an apron and a notepad and pointed to a table of construction workers who had just sat down. Table 4 wants coffee and menus, Rosa said. And remember, smile. People eat better when they're happy. Jasmine tied the apron around her waist, grabbed a pot of coffee, and walked over to the table. The men looked up as she approached, their faces tired but friendly. Good morning, she said, and meant it. Coffee? Please, one of them said. You're new. First day, she admitted, filling their cups. Well, welcome to Rosa's. Best breakfast in the city, and Rosa's good people. As she took their orders and hurried back to the kitchen, Jasmine felt something she had almost forgotten. Pride in her work. It was a simple job, but she was good at it. She was fast and friendly and efficient, and by the end of the morning rush, Rosa was nodding approvingly. You did good today, Rosa said as they cleaned up. You want to pick up some extra hours this week? Yes, absolutely. Good. I like people who aren't afraid of hard work. Rosa paused in her wiping down of the counter. You running from something, Mija? The question was asked gently, without judgment, but it still made Jasmine's chest tighten. Something like that. Thought so. I can always tell. That's okay. Sometimes running towards something looks the same as running away from something. The important thing is that you keep moving. As Jasmine walked home that afternoon, her feet aching and her uniform smelling like bacon grease, she thought about Rosa's words. Maybe she was running away from Thomas, from the life she had built around making him happy. But she was also running toward something, toward independence, toward her own dreams, toward becoming the person she was meant to be. For the first time in years, that person felt like someone worth knowing. 3 weeks at Rosa's kitchen had taught Jasmine more about hard work than 5 years of marriage to Thomas ever had. Her feet hurt constantly, her back ached from carrying heavy trays, and she went to bed every night exhausted. But she also went to bed every night with cash in her pocket and a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. More importantly, she was learning from Rosa, who turned out to be much more than just a diner owner. During the slow afternoon hours, Rosa would share stories about building her business from nothing, about the challenges of being a woman entrepreneur in a male-dominated industry, about the importance of treating every customer like family. "You know," Rosa said one Tuesday as they prepped vegetables for the dinner rush, "you're too smart to be waiting tables forever." Jasmine looked up from the onions she was chopping. "I like working here. I like having you here. But I see how you watch everything, how you ask questions about suppliers and costs and profit margins. You're thinking like a business owner, not an employee." It was true. Jasmine found herself fascinated by every aspect of running the restaurant. She had reorganized the supply closet to make it more efficient, suggested a new system for tracking orders that saved Rosa time and money, and even helped design a new menu layout that customers said was easier to read. "I used to have business plans," Jasmine admitted. Before what? "Before my husband convinced me I wasn't smart enough to run a business." Rosa set down her knife and looked at Jasmine directly. "Mija, I've been running this place for 15 years. I've seen smart and I've seen stupid. You're smart. Don't let anyone tell you different." That afternoon, Mrs. Peterson's graduation party was a bigger success than Jasmine had dared to hope. She had spent her day off shopping for ingredients, using every coupon and sale she could find to stretch her budget. She had cooked in her tiny apartment kitchen, working around the clock to prepare enough food for 30 people. The menu was simple but elegant: honey-glazed chicken, herb-roasted vegetables, fresh salad with homemade dressing, and her grandmother's famous sweet potato pie. She had borrowed serving dishes from Rosa and transported everything in her car, praying the whole way that nothing would spill or spoil. But when she arrived at Mrs. Peterson's house and saw the guests' faces light up as they tasted her food, all the stress and exhaustion was worth it. People kept asking who had catered the party, complimenting the flavors and presentation. 3 different people asked for her business card. "I don't have cards yet," she had to admit, but she wrote her number on napkins and promised to call them about future events. Mrs. Peterson pulled her aside as she was packing up. "Jasmine, this was incredible. You have real talent for this. Thank you. That means everything to me. I mean it. My book club meets next month, and we always order catering for our special events. Would you be interested?" "Absolutely. And my neighbor was asking about you. She's planning her anniversary party and wants to hire you." Jasmine felt her heart racing with excitement and terror. Real customers, real events, real money. This could actually work. That night, she sat in her apartment with her laptop and started building a real business plan. Not the theoretical one she had shown Thomas, but a practical, step-by-step guide for growing her catering company. She researched licensing requirements, calculated startup costs, designed a simple website using a free template. She was still working when her phone rang at 11 p.m. Thomas's name appeared on the screen, and for once, she answered. "Jasmine?" His voice sounded surprised, like he hadn't expected her to pick up. "Hi, Thomas. I've been worried about you. Are you okay? Where are you staying?" "I'm fine. I have my own apartment now." There was a long pause. "Your own apartment? How are you paying for that? Did Nina give you money?" The assumption that she couldn't take care of herself stung, but it also strengthened her resolve. I have a job. What kind of job? I'm working at a restaurant. And I'm starting my catering business. Another pause, longer this time. Jasmine, come home. We can work this out. I miss you. For just a moment, she felt herself wavering. The old Jasmine would have been touched by the loneliness in his voice, would have focused on his feelings instead of her own. But the new Jasmine had spent 3 weeks proving she could take care of herself, and she wasn't going back to being small. I'm not coming home, Thomas. I'm building something here. Building what? You're waiting tables and playing restaurant with borrowed dishes. That's not a career, that's a fantasy. The dismissal in his voice was so familiar, so automatic, that she almost laughed. He hadn't changed at all. He still saw her dreams as childish games, her efforts as cute but pointless attempts to prove something she didn't need to prove. My fantasy just made me $300 in one afternoon, she said calmly. And I have 3 more events booked for next month. $300. He actually laughed. Jasmine, I make that in 3 hours. You're destroying our marriage over pocket change. I'm not destroying our marriage, Thomas. I'm building a life where I matter. You matter here. You matter to me. No, she said, and she was surprised by how clear her voice sounded. I matter to you when I'm making your life easier. When I'm supporting your dreams and forgetting my own. When I'm small enough to fit into the space you've decided I should occupy. That's not the same thing. She hung up before he could respond, and immediately turned off her phone. She wasn't ready for the barrage of angry texts that would inevitably follow. Instead, she went back to her business plan, energized by the conversation in a way that surprised her. Every dismissive word Thomas had spoken had reminded her why she was here, why she had left, why she couldn't go back. She worked until 2 in the morning, building spreadsheets and timelines and marketing strategies. When she finally went to bed, she felt more hopeful about her future than she had in years. The next morning at Rosa's, she was humming while she set up tables. You're in a good mood, Rosa observed. I booked 3 more catering jobs last night. That's wonderful. But also dangerous. Jasmine looked up, confused. Dangerous how? Success is like a drug, Mija. Once you get a taste of building something that's yours, it's hard to be satisfied with anything less. Rosa smiled. Just make sure you're ready for how much your life is about to change. As Jasmine poured coffee and took orders and chatted with regular customers, she thought about Rosa's warning. Change was scary, but it was also necessary. She had spent too many years afraid of what might happen if she took risks, if she failed, if she tried and didn't succeed. But now she was more afraid of what would happen if she didn't try at all. That afternoon, during her break, she walked to the small business office downtown and picked up the paperwork to register her company officially. Sweet Dreams Catering, she wrote in careful letters on the application. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was becoming real. 2 months after leaving Thomas, Jasmine was working 7 days a week and loving every exhausted minute of it. Her days started at Rosa's kitchen at 6 a.m., serving breakfast to construction workers and office employees who had become like family. Her afternoons were spent planning menus, shopping for ingredients, and cooking in her tiny apartment kitchen. Her evenings were spent at catering events, watching people enjoy food she had prepared with her own hands. The money was still tight, but it was steady. Between her wages at the diner and her growing catering business, she was covering her expenses and even managing to save a little each month. More importantly, she was building something that belonged to her. You need a real kitchen, Rosa said for the 3rd time that week, watching Jasmine struggle to fit a large pot into her apartment-sized oven. My cousin owns a commercial kitchen space that he rents out to small caterers. Very reasonable rates. I can't afford reasonable rates yet, Jasmine replied, stirring the soup she was preparing for a corporate lunch. But maybe in a few months. Maybe sooner than you think. Rosa handed her a piece of paper. Mrs. Chen from the dry cleaner next door wants to hire you for her son's wedding. 200 people. Jasmine nearly dropped her spoon. Her biggest event so far had been 50 people at a company picnic. 200 people would require equipment she didn't have, space she didn't have, help she couldn't afford. I can't do a wedding that size. Why not? Because. Jasmine trailed off, realizing that her first instinct was to list all the reasons she wasn't ready, wasn't capable, wasn't enough. The voice in her head sounded suspiciously like Thomas. Because it would be a huge risk. So was leaving your husband. So was starting this business. So was walking into my diner and asking for a job. Rosa smiled. Sometimes the biggest risks have the biggest rewards. That evening, Jasmine met with Mrs. Chen and her son Patrick to discuss the wedding. They wanted elegant but not pretentious, traditional Chinese dishes alongside American favorites, something that would make both families happy. The budget was generous enough to cover real equipment rentals and even hire some help. We've heard wonderful things about your food, Mrs. Chen said. Mrs. Peterson raves about you, and the Johnsons said their anniversary party was the best they've ever had. Jasmine felt a warm glow of pride. Word was spreading organically, one satisfied customer telling another, building the kind of reputation that couldn't be bought with advertising. When is the wedding? 6 weeks from Saturday. I know it's short notice, but our original caterer had to cancel due to a family emergency. 6 weeks. It was tight, but it was doable. I'd love to do it, Jasmine heard herself saying. Let me put together a detailed proposal for you. As she drove home that night, her mind was already spinning with menu ideas and logistics. She would need to rent a commercial kitchen, hire at least 2 assistants, rent proper serving equipment. It was a massive undertaking, the kind of challenge that would either establish her business as legitimate or prove that Thomas had been right about her abilities. But for the first time since leaving him, the thought of Thomas's opinion didn't make her stomach clench with anxiety. She was beyond caring what he thought. She cared what she thought of herself. Her phone rang as she was pulling into her apartment complex. Nina's name appeared on the screen. Hey, stranger, Nina said when she answered. I feel like I haven't talked to you in weeks. Sorry, I've been crazy busy with work. Which job? The diner or the catering? Both. Actually, I might have to cut back my hours at Rosa's soon. The catering business is really taking off. There was a pause. Jasmine, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. The genuine happiness in her sister's voice made Jasmine's eyes water. When had she last felt this supported, this celebrated? Thomas had never sounded proud of her accomplishments. He had always found ways to diminish them, to remind her that they were small victories in the grand scheme of things. Thanks. It's scary, but good scary. Want to grab dinner tomorrow? I want to hear all about it. I can't tomorrow. I'm catering a retirement party. But maybe Sunday. Sunday works. And Jasmine? I'm glad you called me that night. I know you wanted to handle everything yourself, but I'm glad you let me help a little. After they hung up, Jasmine realized Nina was right. She had called her sister that night 3 weeks ago when she had been overwhelmed with orders and needed someone to help her load and transport food to an event. Nina had shown up without questions, spent 4 hours helping her serve and clean up, and refused to accept payment. Family doesn't charge family, Nina had said. Besides, watching you boss people around and make everything run smoothly is the most fun I've had in months. It was the first time Jasmine had allowed herself to accept help without feeling like a failure. The first time she had realized that independence didn't mean doing everything alone. The next morning at Rosa's, she felt different. Confident in a way that was new and exciting. She moved through her shift efficiently, her mind partly focused on the retirement party that evening and partly on the wedding proposal she needed to finish. "You're glowing," one of her regular customers, Mr. Williams, observed as she refilled his coffee. "New boyfriend?" "New business," she replied with a smile. "Sometimes that's better than a boyfriend." Smart woman. Build your own empire first, then find someone worthy of sharing it. As the morning rush wound down, Jasmine noticed a familiar figure walking past the window. Thomas. He was dressed in his expensive suit, probably on his way to a client meeting, and for a split second, their eyes met through the glass. He stopped walking. She stopped wiping down tables. For a moment, they just looked at each other through the window, two people who had once shared a life, a bed, a future. Then he walked into the diner. "Jasmine." His voice was carefully controlled, polite, like he was greeting a business acquaintance instead of his estranged wife. "Thomas." She kept wiping the table, not trusting her hands to stay steady if she stopped moving. "This is where you work." It wasn't a question, and she didn't treat it like one. "Yes." He looked around the diner, taking in the worn vinyl booths, the faded linoleum floors, the smell of bacon grease and coffee that had probably been soaking into the walls for decades. She could see the judgment in his eyes, the confirmation of everything he had predicted about her inability to maintain their standard of living. "Jasmine, this is beneath you." "No," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "It's not. There's nothing beneath me about honest work. You have a college degree. You're intelligent, capable. You don't belong here." Rosa appeared from behind the counter, her expression friendly but alert. "Everything okay here, Jasmine?" "Fine," Jasmine said. "Rosa, this is my husband, Thomas. Thomas, this is Rosa Garcia. She owns this place." Rosa extended her hand with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Nice to meet you. Your wife is a treasure. Best employee I've had in years." Thomas shook her hand politely but didn't return the smile. "I'm sure she is." "Jasmine, can we talk privately?" "I'm working." "Please. Just 5 minutes." Jasmine looked at Rosa, who nodded. "Take your break, Mija. I'll cover your tables." They stepped outside into the afternoon heat, and Thomas immediately moved closer to her, the way he used to when he wanted to have a serious conversation. She stepped back, maintaining distance. "You look good," he said, and his voice was softer now, more like the man she had married. "Different, but good." "Thank you. I miss you. The house is too quiet without you." "Thomas, I know you're angry with me. I know I said things that night that were hurtful. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling, figure out how to make this work." For a moment, Jasmine felt the old pull toward him, the old desire to fix things, to be the peacemaker, to sacrifice her own needs for the sake of their relationship. But then she thought about the retirement party she was catering that evening, about the wedding proposal waiting on her kitchen table, about the way Rosa's customers smiled when they saw her coming with their food. "I don't want to work through this," she said quietly. "I'm happy, Thomas. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy." His face changed, surprise giving way to something that looked almost like hurt. "You're happier without me." "I'm happier being myself." "And you couldn't be yourself with me?" The question was asked with genuine confusion, and Jasmine realized he honestly didn't understand what he had done wrong. To him, he had been a good husband. He had provided for her, protected her, loved her in the only way he knew how. The fact that his love had required her to become smaller, quieter, less ambitious, was something he couldn't see. "No," she said simply. "I couldn't." He stood there for a long moment, looking lost in a way she had never seen before. Finally, he nodded. "The divorce papers will be ready next week. I'll have my lawyer send them to you." "Okay. Jasmine." He paused at the diner door. I really did love you. I hope you know that. I know, she said. But love isn't supposed to make someone disappear. She watched him walk away, his shoulders straight but somehow defeated. For the first time since she left, she felt sad for him instead of angry. He would find someone else, someone who wanted to be taken care of more than they wanted to take care of themselves. He would probably be happy. And so would she. The call came at 7 in the morning, just as Jasmine was getting ready for another shift at Rosa's. She had been working on the Chen wedding proposal until nearly midnight, perfecting every detail, and her eyes were still gritty with exhaustion when her phone rang. Ms. Williams? This is Jennifer Adams from Morrison & Associates. We'd like to discuss catering services for our quarterly board meeting. Jasmine sat up straighter, instantly alert. Morrison & Associates was one of the biggest law firms in the city, the kind of prestigious client that could establish her credibility in the corporate catering market. Of course. What kind of event are you planning? Lunch for 40 people next Friday. We need someone reliable, professional, capable of handling high-profile clients. Your name came up through Mrs. Peterson, who serves on our board. Mrs. Peterson again. The woman had become Jasmine's unofficial marketing director, recommending her to everyone she knew. I'd be very interested. Can we schedule a time to meet and discuss details? Actually, there's something you should know. Jennifer's voice became slightly cautious. The meeting is being held at Thomas Williams & Company. I believe you might know someone there. Jasmine's stomach dropped. Thomas Williams & Company was her husband's firm. The quarterly board meeting would be in the conference room where she had once attended company Christmas parties, back when she was the supportive wife who smiled and made pleasant conversation and never mentioned her own ambitions. Yes, I know the location, she said carefully. Will that be a problem? It would be easier to say yes, to turn down the job and avoid the inevitable awkwardness of serving food to Thomas's colleagues and business partners. But this was exactly the kind of opportunity she needed to take her business to the next level. Corporate clients paid well and on time, and they led to more corporate clients. No problem at all, she heard herself saying. I'm very professional. Excellent. Can you come in this morning to discuss the menu and logistics? An hour later, Jasmine was sitting in the gleaming conference room of Morrison & Associates, feeling underdressed in her simple blouse and slacks. Jennifer Adams turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who got straight to the point. We need lunch that's impressive but not messy, sophisticated but not pretentious. These are important clients, and we want to make a good impression. I understand completely. Jasmine pulled out her portfolio, a simple binder with photos of her previous events and sample menus. I specialize in elegant, business-appropriate presentations. As they went through menu options and discussed pricing, Jasmine felt her confidence growing. This was what she was good at, understanding what clients needed and delivering exactly that. She wasn't just someone's wife anymore, struggling to find her place in his world. She was a business owner with skills and expertise and value to offer. This all looks excellent, Jennifer said, reviewing Jasmine's proposal. There's just one concern I need to address. What's that? Thomas Williams specifically requested that we not hire you for this event. The words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Of course Thomas had tried to sabotage this opportunity. Of course he couldn't stand the idea of her succeeding in his professional world. I see, she managed. However, Jennifer continued, Mrs. Peterson was very insistent that you were the best choice for this event. And frankly, your portfolio speaks for itself. We're more interested in quality than in accommodating personal conflicts. Jasmine felt a surge of gratitude toward Mrs. Peterson and a determination not to let Thomas's petty interference affect her professionalism. I appreciate your confidence in me. I can assure you that any personal matters will not interfere with my service. Good. Because if this event goes well, we have several more corporate functions coming up that will need catered. As Jasmine walked back to her car, her phone was already ringing. Thomas. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was angry, controlled but furious. I'm running a business. You're deliberately trying to embarrass me in front of my colleagues. Actually, I'm trying to build a career. Your colleagues hiring me has nothing to do with you. Everything you do reflects on me, Jasmine. We're still married. Not for much longer. And even if we were, my business decisions aren't about you. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. If you show up at that meeting, you'll regret it. Is that a threat? It's a promise. I have influence in this city, connections you can't imagine. I can make sure no one in the corporate world ever hires you again. For a moment, Jasmine felt the old fear creep in, the instinct to back down and avoid conflict. But then she thought about Rosa's words about success being like a drug, about how hard it was to be satisfied with anything less once you had tasted building something of your own. Then I guess we'll see who has more influence, she said calmly. Me with my food and my reputation, or you with your threats. She hung up and immediately called Rosa to let her know she wouldn't be able to work the full shift on Friday. Big catering job? Rosa asked. The biggest yet. And probably the most complicated. Complicated how? Jasmine explained the situation with Thomas and the law firm, expecting Rosa to advise caution or suggest she turn down the job. Instead, Rosa laughed. Mija, you know what this is? What? This is your moment. The moment when you prove that you're not just surviving, you're thriving. When you show everyone, including yourself, that you belong in any room you choose to enter. That evening, Jasmine worked late into the night preparing for the Chen wedding and the Morrison and Associates lunch. She had never been busier, never been more stressed, and never been more excited about her future. As she fell asleep, she thought about Thomas's threat to sabotage her career. Maybe he could make things difficult for her. Maybe his connections and influence would close some doors. But he couldn't take away her skills, her determination, or the growing list of people who believed in her. And those were the only things that really mattered. Friday morning couldn't come fast enough. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Jasmine's nervous energy as she loaded her car with carefully packed containers of food. She had barely slept, running through every detail of the lunch service in her mind, determined that nothing would go wrong. This wasn't just about impressing Morrison and Associates anymore, it was about proving to Thomas, and to herself, that she belonged in his world as an equal, not as an accessory. The menu was perfect for a business lunch: herb-crusted salmon with lemon butter sauce, grilled chicken with Mediterranean vegetables, wild rice pilaf, mixed green salad with pomegranate vinaigrette, and her grandmother's famous dinner rolls. For dessert, individual chocolate tarts that looked elegant but weren't messy to eat. Professional, sophisticated, memorable. She arrived at Thomas Williams & Company 30 minutes early, using her key card that miraculously still worked to access the building's service entrance. The familiar hallways felt strange now, like visiting a house where you used to live but no longer belonged. She had spent so many evenings here, waiting for Thomas to finish working late, making small talk with his colleagues at company events, playing the role of the supportive wife. Now she was here as a business owner, and the difference in how she felt was remarkable. The conference room was exactly as she remembered it: gleaming mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, expensive art on the walls. She had always felt intimidated by this room, by the importance of the deals made here, the power wielded by the people who sat around this table. Today, she felt capable. She was setting up the buffet when Thomas walked in. Jasmine. His voice was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his mouth. Thomas. She didn't stop arranging the serving dishes, partly because she needed to focus on her work and partly because she didn't trust her hands to stay steady if she stopped moving. You look. He paused, studying her. Professional. She was wearing a black dress with a fitted blazer, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun, minimal jewelry. It was the kind of outfit she used to wear to his company functions, but somehow it felt different on her now. More confident, more her own. "Thank you. I tried to tell Jennifer that this was a mistake." "I know." She looked up at him directly. "It wasn't your decision to make. Everything that happens in this room affects my reputation. Then I guess you'd better hope I do a good job." For a moment, they just looked at each other across the conference table that had probably hosted millions of dollars in deals. Two people who had once planned a future together, now facing each other as professional adversaries. "Why are you doing this?" Thomas asked, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely confused rather than angry. "You could have built a catering business anywhere in the city. Why here? Why now?" "Because I'm good at what I do," she said simply. "And because I have every right to pursue clients here, just like any other business owner in this city." "But we have history," "We do. But that history doesn't give you the right to control my career choices." People started arriving then, lawyers and clients and board members filtering into the conference room with the kind of confident chatter that came from important people doing important work. Jasmine recognized some of them from company parties, and she could see the surprise on their faces when they saw her behind the buffet table. Mrs. Peterson arrived with the Morrison and Associates team, and her face lit up when she saw Jasmine. "Oh, wonderful, you decided to take the job after all." "Of course. Thank you so much for the recommendation." "My pleasure, dear. I've been bragging about your food to everyone who will listen." As the meeting participants filled their plates, Jasmine watched their reactions carefully. The salmon was perfectly cooked, flaky and seasoned just right. The chicken was tender and flavorful. The salad was fresh and vibrant. People were taking second helpings, which was always a good sign. "This is incredible," she heard one of the Morrison and Associates partners saying to Jennifer. "Where did you find this caterer?" "Local recommendation," Jennifer replied, glancing toward Thomas with a slight smile. "Sometimes the best resources are right under our noses." Thomas was sitting at the head of the table, picking at his food without really eating it. Jasmine could see him watching the other attendees, gauging their reactions, probably hoping someone would complain so he could feel vindicated in his opposition to hiring her. But no one complained. In fact, the opposite was happening. She overheard multiple conversations about the quality of the food, requests for her business card, inquiries about availability for upcoming events. "Excuse me," said a distinguished man in an expensive suit, approaching the buffet table. "I'm Robert Chen from Pacific Investment Group. This meal is outstanding. Thank you so much. I'm Jasmine Williams, owner of Sweet Dreams Catering." "Williams?" He glanced toward Thomas. "Any relation to our host?" For just a moment, Jasmine hesitated. It would be easy to deflect, to avoid the complication of their relationship. But she was here as herself, as a business owner in her own right, and she refused to hide anymore. "Thomas is my husband," she said clearly. "Soon-to-be ex-husband." Robert Chen raised an eyebrow but didn't seem bothered by the personal drama. "Well, regardless of your family connections, this is the best business lunch I've had in years. Do you have a card?" She handed him one of the simple business cards she had printed the week before. "I'd be happy to discuss catering for any of your events. Actually, we're planning our annual investor dinner next month. 200 people, very high-end clientele. Would you be interested?" 200 people. The same size as the Chen wedding, but with an even more prestigious client base. The kind of event that could establish her as a serious player in the corporate catering market. "Absolutely," she said, trying to keep her excitement out of her voice. "I'll put together a proposal for you." As the meeting wound down and people began to leave, Jasmine started packing up her serving dishes. The event had been a complete success, better than she had dared to hope. She had 3 new client inquiries, multiple compliments on the food, and most importantly, she had proven to herself that she could handle high-pressure, high-profile events with professionalism and skill. Thomas approached as she was loading the last of her equipment onto her cart. That was. He paused, seeming to struggle for words. The food was excellent. Thank you. I didn't expect. He trailed off again, then started over. You've changed. Yes, I have. I barely recognize you. She looked at him, this man she had been married to for 5 years, and realized the feeling was mutual. He seemed smaller somehow, less imposing than he used to. Or maybe she was just seeing him more clearly now, without the filter of trying to please him, trying to be what he wanted her to be. I'm the same person I always was, she said. I just stopped hiding it. I made mistakes, he said quietly. I see that now. Maybe we could, no. The word came out firm and clear, without hesitation. We couldn't. Jasmine, I'm not angry with you anymore, Thomas. I'm grateful. If you hadn't pushed me away, I never would have discovered what I was capable of. She pushed her cart toward the elevator, leaving him standing alone in the conference room where he wielded so much power but couldn't control the woman who used to be his wife. As the elevator doors closed, Jasmine caught her reflection in the polished metal. She looked strong, confident, successful. She looked like someone who belonged in any room she chose to enter. She looked like herself. The morning after the Morrison & Associates lunch, Jasmine woke up to 17 new emails and 12 voicemails from potential clients. Word had spread quickly through the city's business community about the impressive catering at the law firm meeting, and suddenly everyone wanted to book Sweet Dreams Catering for their events. She was sitting at her tiny kitchen table, laptop open, trying to organize all the inquiries when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Sweet Dreams Catering, this is Jasmine. Ms. Williams, this is Patricia Morrison from Morrison & Associates. We were so impressed with your service yesterday that we'd like to offer you something special. Jasmine felt her heart rate spike. Oh. We're looking for an exclusive catering partner for all our corporate events. It's a significant contract, approximately 50 events per year, ranging from small meetings to large conferences. The annual value would be around $200,000. Jasmine nearly dropped the phone. $200,000 was more money than she had ever imagined making in a year. It would allow her to quit Rosa's, rent a proper commercial kitchen, hire full-time staff, maybe even open her own restaurant someday. That sounds incredible, she managed. There is one condition, Patricia continued. The exclusivity would require you to not cater for any of our competitors. We'd provide you with a list of firms that would be off-limits. I understand. Can you send me the details to review? Of course. I should mention that we've had several inquiries about you since yesterday. You've made quite an impression on our business community. After Patricia hung up, Jasmine sat in stunned silence. 6 months ago, she had been a housewife with a dream. Now she was being offered a contract that could set her up for life. It felt surreal, like someone else's life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nina, coffee later. I have news. Can't today, drowning in new business. But yes, we need to celebrate soon. That's amazing. Call me when you surface. Jasmine spent the rest of the morning responding to emails and scheduling consultations. Every conversation was an opportunity, every potential client a step toward building something bigger than she had ever dreamed possible. Around noon, her phone rang again. This time, she recognized the number, Robert Chen from Pacific Investment Group. Ms. Williams, I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday about our investor dinner. Of course, Mr. Chen. I'm putting together a proposal for you. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I've had a change of heart about the event. Jasmine's stomach dropped. Oh. Was there something about our discussion that concerned you? Not at all. Your food was exceptional, and I was very impressed with your professionalism. Unfortunately, I received a call this morning from Thomas Williams. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I see. He suggested that hiring you might create complications. He was quite persuasive about the potential for personal drama affecting the quality of service. Jasmine felt heat rise in her cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and anger that Thomas was actively sabotaging her business relationships. Mr. Chen, I can assure you that my personal life has never and will never interfere with my professional obligations. I believe you. But in our business, perception is reality. We can't afford any hint of drama at such an important event. After he hung up, Jasmine sat staring at her phone, feeling sick. Thomas was doing exactly what he had threatened, using his influence and connections to damage her reputation before she could fully establish it. Her phone buzzed with an email from Patricia Morrison. The subject line read, "Contract details urgent." She opened it with shaking hands, expecting the worst. "Jasmine, I wanted to give you a heads up. We've received some concerning information about your business practices and personal situation. Before we can move forward with the contract, we need to discuss these matters. Can you come in this afternoon?" Jasmine called immediately. "Patricia, this is Jasmine Williams. I just got your email." "Yes, I'm glad you called. We've had some inquiries about your company. Questions about your reliability and professionalism." "What kind of questions?" "I'd rather discuss this in person. Can you be here at 3? The Morrison and Associates office felt different this time. Less welcoming, more formal. Patricia's smile was polite but distant as she led Jasmine to a small conference room. "I'll get straight to the point," Patricia said, settling into her chair. "We received a call this morning from Thomas Williams. He expressed concerns about your ability to handle large-scale events professionally." "What kind of concerns?" "He suggested that you've been having financial difficulties, that you've had to borrow equipment and space from other businesses because you lack the resources to operate independently. He also mentioned that you've been known to become emotional under pressure." Each word was a carefully placed knife. Thomas knew exactly how to undermine her credibility without saying anything that was technically untrue. She did borrow equipment sometimes. She did rent kitchen space when needed. These were normal practices for a growing catering business, but Thomas was making them sound like signs of instability. "Patricia," Jasmine said, keeping her voice steady, "everything Thomas told you is either taken out of context or deliberately misleading." "Yes, I rent equipment when needed, that's standard practice for caterers who don't want to invest in expensive items they'll only use occasionally. Yes, I sometimes use commercial kitchen space, again, completely normal for a growing business." "And the emotional instability?" "I have never been anything but professional with clients. I think what Thomas is referring to is the fact that I left him when our marriage became unsustainable. If that's emotional instability, then I'm guilty as charged." Patricia was quiet for a moment, studying Jasmine's face. "This puts us in a difficult position. Thomas Williams and Company is one of our oldest clients. We can't afford to damage that relationship." "I understand," Jasmine said, though her heart was breaking. "But I hope you'll consider that judging my professional capabilities based on my husband's opinion of our personal relationship isn't exactly fair." "You're right, it's not fair. But business isn't always fair." As Jasmine walked back to her car, she felt the crushing weight of disappointment and rage. Thomas was systematically destroying opportunities she had earned through her own hard work and talent. He was using his professional relationships to punish her for leaving him, to prove his point that she couldn't survive without him. Her phone rang. "Nina. Hey, I know you're busy, but I just heard something weird. My friend works at Chin Investment Group, and she said they were talking about you today. Something about a catering contract." Jasmine closed her eyes. Thomas is sabotaging my business. He's calling my potential clients and poisoning them against me. That bastard. Can you sue him or something? For what? He's not saying anything technically false, just presenting facts in the worst possible light. And he has more money for lawyers than I do. So what are you going to do? Jasmine looked up at the glass building where she had just lost a $200,000 contract because her husband couldn't stand to see her succeed. For a moment, she felt the old urge to give up, to call Thomas and beg him to stop, to go back to being small and safe and invisible. But then she thought about Rosa's words about success being a drug, about the taste of building something that was hers. She thought about the customers at yesterday's lunch who had raved about her food, who had asked for her business card without knowing or caring about her marital drama. I'm going to prove him wrong, she said. Not just to him, but to everyone. I'm going to build something so good, so successful, that his petty sabotage won't matter. How? I don't know yet. But I'll figure it out. As she drove home, Jasmine's mind was already working on a plan. Thomas had connections in the corporate world, but he didn't control everything. There were other markets, other opportunities, other ways to build a successful business. He wanted to play dirty. Fine. But he was about to learn that underestimating her had always been his biggest mistake. The farmers' market on Saturday morning was bustling with early shoppers and vendors setting up their stalls. Jasmine moved through the crowds with purpose, selecting the freshest vegetables and herbs for the Chen wedding that was now just a week away. After yesterday's devastating losses of the Morrison contract and the Pacific Investment dinner, she was more determined than ever to make the wedding perfect. She was examining a display of organic tomatoes when someone bumped into her, nearly sending her basket flying. I'm so sorry. The man's voice was warm, with just a hint of an accent. I wasn't watching where I was going. Jasmine looked up into the kindest brown eyes she had ever seen. He was about her age, with olive skin and dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days. No harm done, she said, steadying her basket. You're buying a lot of vegetables, he observed, gesturing to her overflowing basket. Big family dinner. Wedding catering, actually. I'm Jasmine Williams, owner of Sweet Dreams Catering. Carlos Mendoza, he said, extending his hand. I own Mendoza Farms. We supply a lot of the produce here. His handshake was firm and calloused, the hands of someone who worked with the earth. There was something immediately trustworthy about him, an openness that was the complete opposite of Thomas's polished corporate demeanor. Your tomatoes? She asked, gesturing to the display. Among other things. We grow about 60 different varieties of vegetables and herbs. Organic, sustainable, all that good stuff. They're beautiful. Perfect for what I need. What kind of wedding? As Jasmine described the Chen wedding menu, Carlos listened with the kind of attention that made her feel like what she was saying mattered. When she mentioned her need for specialty herbs that weren't available at most suppliers, his face lit up. I grow all of those. And if you're interested, I could give you a tour of the farm sometime. Most chefs find it helpful to see where their ingredients come from. I'd love that. But I should warn you, I'm pretty particular about quality. Carlos laughed, a rich sound that made something warm bloom in Jasmine's chest. I hope so. I don't want to work with anyone who isn't passionate about what they do. They spent the next hour walking through the market together, Carlos introducing her to other vendors, sharing stories about sustainable farming, asking thoughtful questions about her business. It was the kind of easy conversation that usually took months to develop, but felt natural from the first moment. Can I ask you something? Carlos said as they reached the end of the market. You seem pretty established for someone I've never met. How long have you been catering? About 6 months, Jasmine admitted. I'm still building my client base. 6 months. That's impressive. Starting a food business is brutal. What made you decide to take the risk? For a moment, Jasmine considered giving him the sanitized version, a story about following her dreams and taking control of her life. But something about Carlos's genuine interest made her want to tell the truth. My husband told me I wasn't smart enough to run a business. So I left him and started one to prove him wrong. Carlos was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Good for you. Though I'm sorry he made you feel like you had to prove anything. Anyone who tastes your food would know you're brilliant. You haven't tasted my food yet. I've been watching you shop for the past hour. The way you select ingredients, the questions you ask, the care you take with every choice. That tells me everything I need to know about how you cook. It was such a simple observation, but it hit Jasmine deeply. Thomas had never paid attention to how she approached cooking, had never seen the artistry and skill in what she did. To him, cooking was just something wives did, not a craft worthy of respect. Would you like to have coffee sometime? Carlos asked as they reached her car. I promise not to talk about vegetables the entire time. Jasmine hesitated. She wasn't sure she was ready to date, wasn't sure she knew how to be with someone who actually saw her as an equal. But there was something about Carlos that made her want to take the risk. I'd like that, she said. But fair warning, I work a lot right now. Building a business doesn't leave much time for anything else. I understand completely. I work 7 days a week during growing season. But even farmers have to eat. How about lunch on Tuesday? There's a great little place near my farm. They exchanged numbers, and Jasmine drove home with a smile on her face for the first time in days. It wasn't just Carlos's obvious interest that made her happy, it was the way he had looked at her. Like she was someone worth knowing, someone with value and opinions and dreams that mattered. Tuesday's lunch turned into a 3-hour conversation over sandwiches and iced tea. Carlos told her about growing up on his family's farm in Mexico, coming to the United States for college and deciding to stay, building his organic farming business from nothing. Jasmine found herself sharing stories about her childhood, her dreams of business ownership, even some of the painful details about her marriage to Thomas. He sounds like he was intimidated by you, Carlos said when she finished explaining why she had left. Intimidated? By me? Think about it. You're intelligent, ambitious, capable of building something meaningful. That's threatening to someone who needs to feel superior to feel secure. It was a perspective Jasmine had never considered. She had always assumed Thomas's behavior came from genuine concern for her well-being, that he really believed she wasn't capable of success. The idea that his control might have been rooted in his own insecurity was both illuminating and liberating. I never thought of it that way. Strong women scare weak men, Carlos said simply. The right man celebrates your strength instead of trying to diminish it. Over the following weeks, as Jasmine threw herself into preparing for the Chin wedding, Carlos became a constant, steady presence in her life. He delivered fresh produce to her apartment, stayed to help her prep vegetables, offered thoughtful suggestions about flavor combinations and seasonal ingredients. More importantly, he listened. When she vented about Thomas's continued sabotage of her business opportunities, Carlos offered practical advice about building relationships with different types of clients. When she worried about whether she was taking on too much too fast, he reminded her of everything she had already accomplished. You know what I love about watching you work, he said one evening as they prepped herbs for the wedding. You never doubt the food. You might doubt yourself, but you never doubt that what you're creating is excellent. Food doesn't lie, Jasmine replied. If it's good, people know. If it's not, they know that too. Exactly. And your food is extraordinary. Trust that. The night before the Chin wedding, Jasmine was in her apartment kitchen making final preparations when Thomas called. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Jasmine? I need to talk to you. Thomas, I don't have time for this. I have a wedding tomorrow. That's what I'm calling about. The Chin wedding. Her blood went cold. What about it? I know the family through business connections. They're good people, Jasmine. They don't deserve to have their son's wedding ruined because you're in over your head. I'm not in over my head. 200 people. With rented equipment and borrowed kitchen space. You're setting yourself up to fail, and you're going to take their special day down with you. For just a moment, the old doubts crept in. 200 people was more than she had ever handled. The logistics were complex, the timing critical. What if something went wrong? What if Thomas was right? Then she looked around her kitchen, at the perfect vegetables Carlos had delivered, at the detailed timeline she had spent weeks perfecting, at the proof of her own competence surrounding her. You know what, Thomas? You're right about one thing. The Chens are good people, and they deserve the best possible wedding. That's exactly what they're going to get. She hung up and immediately called Carlos. Hey, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Ready for the big day? Terrified and excited and completely ready, she said. Carlos. Thank you. For everything. Thank me after the wedding. Right now, get some sleep. Tomorrow, you're going to show everyone what you're capable of. As Jasmine finally went to bed, she thought about the difference between Thomas's predictions of failure and Carlos's confidence in her success. One was based on a need to control and diminish. The other was based on genuine knowledge of who she was and what she could do. Tomorrow would prove which one of them was right. The Chin wedding was perfect. Not just good, not just successful, but absolutely perfect in every detail. 200 guests raved about the food, the presentation, the seamless service. The bride's grandmother, who had been skeptical about hiring such a young caterer, sought Jasmine out personally to tell her it was the best wedding food she had ever tasted. Standing in the back of the elegant ballroom, watching families from two different cultures come together over her carefully prepared feast, Jasmine felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with money or success. This was what she had been meant to do all along, create moments of joy and connection through food. Carlos appeared beside her, handsome in the black shirt and slacks she had asked him to wear as her assistant for the evening. He had insisted on helping with the service, refusing payment and working as hard as any of her hired staff. "Penny for your thoughts," he said quietly. "Just thinking about how different my life was a year ago. Any regrets?" She considered the question seriously. A year ago, she had been married, living in a beautiful house, financially secure but spiritually empty. Now she was working 18-hour days, living in a tiny apartment, building something uncertain but entirely her own. "None," she said. "Not one." 6 months later, Sweet Dreams Catering had become one of the most sought-after catering companies in the city. Word of mouth from satisfied customers had proven more powerful than any sabotage Thomas could manage. Jasmine had hired 2 full-time employees, rented a commercial kitchen space, and was booked solid for the next 4 months. The morning of her restaurant opening, she stood outside the small storefront that would house Sweet Dreams Cafe and Catering, watching workers hang the sign she had designed herself. The space was modest but charming, with exposed brick walls, wooden tables made by a local craftsman, and an open kitchen where customers could watch their food being prepared. It wasn't the grand restaurant empire she had once dreamed of, but it was hers. Every table, every recipe, every decision had been made by her, reflecting her vision and values. "Nervous?" Nina asked, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "Terrified," Jasmine admitted. "But good terrified. The best kind." Nina handed her a coffee and looked up at the sign. "I'm so proud of you. You know that, right?" "I know. Thank you for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. That's what sisters are for." The soft opening that evening was invitation only, attended by friends, family, regular customers from Rosa's Kitchen, and many of the clients who had supported her catering business from the beginning. Mrs. Peterson arrived with a bouquet of flowers and a huge smile. Rosa came straight from her own restaurant, dressed in her best outfit and beaming with pride. "You did it, Mija," Rosa said, pulling Jasmine into a fierce hug. "You built something beautiful." "I learned from the best," Jasmine replied. Carlos arrived just as she was starting to worry he wouldn't make it. His farm was an hour away, and she knew he had been dealing with a crisis involving his irrigation system all day. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing her cheek. "But I wouldn't miss this for anything." Their relationship had developed slowly, carefully, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than passion or convenience. He had never tried to change her or control her decisions. Instead, he had become her biggest supporter, her sounding board, her partner in every sense that mattered. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a small wrapped package. Inside was a wooden cutting board, handmade and engraved with the Sweet Dreams logo. "For all the amazing meals still to come," the inscription read. "Carlos, it's beautiful. I wanted you to have something that was just yours, that represented what you've built." As the evening progressed, Jasmine moved through her restaurant greeting guests, accepting congratulations, watching people enjoy food prepared in her kitchen. Every smile, every compliment, every satisfied customer felt like validation of the choice she had made to leave safety behind and pursue her dreams. Near the end of the evening, she was surprised to see a familiar figure walk through the door. Thomas, dressed in one of his expensive suits, looking somehow smaller than she remembered. She approached him cautiously, not sure what to expect. "Congratulations," he said, and his voice was quiet, subdued. "This is impressive." "Thank you. I owe you an apology." "Several apologies, actually." He looked around the restaurant, taking in the bustling kitchen, the happy customers, the obvious success of everything she had built. "I was wrong about you. About what you were capable of." "Yes, you were. I've been thinking a lot about our marriage, about the things I said and did. I know I hurt you, and I know I tried to hold you back. I told myself it was because I loved you, but..." He trailed off, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily. "I think I was just scared of losing you. Scared that if you became too successful, too independent, you wouldn't need me anymore." It was the most honest thing Thomas had ever said to her, and also the saddest. "The irony is that if you had supported my dreams instead of trying to crush them, you never would have lost me. I know that now. Too late, but I know it." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, two people who had once shared everything now struggling to find common ground. "Are you happy?" he asked finally. Jasmine looked around her restaurant, at Carlos helping to clear tables without being asked, at Nina laughing with Rosa near the kitchen, at all the people who had come to celebrate her success. "Yes," she said. "I really am." "Good. You deserve to be happy." He paused at the door. "And Jasmine? I'm sorry I made you fight so hard to prove something you never should have had to prove." After he left, Jasmine stood for a moment processing the conversation. She felt closure but not satisfaction, sadness for what their marriage could have been but no regret about leaving it behind. Carlos appeared beside her, as he always seemed to when she needed him. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," she said, and meant it. As the last guests filtered out and her staff finished cleaning up, Jasmine sat at one of her tables with Carlos and Nina, sharing a bottle of wine and leftover dessert. The restaurant was quiet now, but it felt alive, full of potential and promise. "So what's next?" Nina asked. "World domination." Jasmine laughed. "Maybe just a second location someday. And a cookbook. I've been thinking about writing down all of grandmother's recipes before I forget them." "That sounds perfect," Carlos said. "Keeping the past alive while building the future." Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Jasmine stood alone in her restaurant kitchen. It was clean and quiet, ready for tomorrow's service, ready for whatever came next. On the wall hung a photo of her grandmother, the woman who had first taught her that cooking was an act of love, that feeding people was one of the most important things you could do in life. "We did it, Grandma," she whispered to the photo. "We really did it." Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, people working late, going out for dinner, building their own dreams and facing their own challenges. Jasmine was part of it now in a way she had never been before, not as someone's wife or daughter or assistant, but as herself. As a business owner, a community member, a woman who had taken control of her own destiny. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos, "Proud of you. See you tomorrow." Tomorrow. There would be customers to serve, orders to cook, a business to run. There would be challenges and setbacks and moments of doubt. But there would also be success and growth and the deep satisfaction that came from building something meaningful with your own hands. Thomas had been wrong about so many things, but mostly he had been wrong about her. She hadn't just survived on her own, she had thrived. She had built something beautiful and lasting and entirely her own. And she was just getting started. As she turned off the lights and locked the door of Sweet Dreams Cafe and Catering, Jasmine smiled at the woman reflected in the glass. Strong, confident, successful, happy. The woman she had always been meant to be. The woman she finally had the courage to become.